Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be going over 5 rulings for post-Photon Hypernova. So it's been some time since the last ruling video, and with the new set, we're going to have a couple archetypes. Mainly, we're going to talk about Kashtira rulings that come out and get support that are going to be important to talk about when it comes to the rules pertaining to some of their cards. So getting started, for the first ruling, it's going to be sort of a general one, but it has a lot to do with Kashtira Arise card. So what happened was, according to the OCG card database, that's where the ruling was posted, there has been a ruling about distinguishing piles of face-down banished cards. And I would like to say, before we get started with the explanation, that you should always consult your head judge when it comes to this, because sometimes judges will go by OCG card database here in the TCG as well, because it's pretty much the only ruling we have on the topic. But it might not always be the case, so just ask your head judge, just be sure of that. But basically, what they said is going to happen is that when it comes to the effect of Kashtira Arise card, you can actually choose which card you want to attach from the banished pile according to how the card was banished. So when cards get banished face down, whether that be off of Pot of Desires, off of Diablosis, just whatever, any card practically that banishes face down, you are allowed to distinguish those piles in actual physical piles of different cards, like the one from Pot of Desires together, the one from Diablosis together. So you can say which pile was banished off of which effect. And when your opponent or you or whoever chooses to actually attach a banished card, you can say, okay, I'm choosing from the pile that was banished from either Diablosis or whatever it may be. So it's important to distinguish them if you want, and you are allowed to do so. So that's going to be the first ruling that we covered today. So the next ruling is going to be about Gishki Ice Mirror, and I want to read the actual effect to you guys. Basically, the card says, Ritual summon one Gishki ritual monster from your hand by attributing either one face-up monster your opponent controls or monsters from your hand or field whose total levels exactly equal its level. And if you do, you lose life points equal to its original attack. And basically the question is whether or not you are allowed to tribute any of the opponent's monsters. And the answer is yes, you can also tribute a link monster if you want, because the part where it says that their levels need to exactly match is only in the case of you using your own monsters. So you are perfectly allowed to take basically any of the opponent's monsters tributed for your ritual summon, which makes Gishki Ice Mirror a really strong card going second. And I do think it's going to be a powerful card in that deck, in that version, either in the main or side decks. So you are allowed to tribute any of your opponent's monsters, regardless of its level or the lack thereof, maybe. So for the next one, we are also going to be going by the official card database ruling, although there is no explanation as to why the card should function that way, or in case there is and I missed it, please let me know down in the comments. But basically, it's just one of those cases where it's just the way they said it's going to work, so that's how it's going to work. And as for the database, only one player needs to control 2 or more monsters for the card to be legally allowed to activate. So usually the way these cards would work, it sort of just makes sense for both of the players having to have at least like 2 or more monsters, but it's not how that card is going to work, at least for the database. And basically, like in the mirror match, you can control 0 monsters, and if your opponent controls a Kashtira XYZ and 2 or more monsters, you can just make them banish so they only control 1, which is sort of insane. And yeah, that's just how the card is apparently going to work. So as for the last one, when it comes to Kashtira, it's going to be about the main monster zones being locked by Kashtira Shangri-Ira, and you trying to activate a card that's going to take control of their monster, Shangri-Ira, whatever it may be. So you are not legally allowed to activate a card like Change of Heart, Talents, any of the sort if all of your main monster zones are being locked by Kashtira Shangri-Ira. And even if your extra monster zone may be unoccupied, that still doesn't really matter because the card wouldn't go there anyway when you take control of it. So it is illegal to activate it. And also, if you look at Kurikara, which is a card that's been hyped up for some time now, actually, being a good card in the matchup and all of that is even going up in price. People are stocking up on Kurikara. But how Kurikara is going to work, if all of your monster zones are occupied, main monster zones, you cannot summon it, even if you would tribute the Kashtira Shangri-Ira. And the Kashtira Shangri-Ira, when it's not faced up, it's not locking zones anymore. So you cannot legally summon it, and you cannot legally activate cards that take control of the monster, which is really, really important to note. And for the last ruling, it's basically just going to be a general one. It doesn't really have anything to do with a specific archetype, but it's just one I wanted to include because it's like a cool piece of information, basically, maybe something to clear things up because there might be some confusion when it comes to these things. Basically, how do continuous chap cards work when they have effects that like are separately worded on them and you don't have to activate them on the activation of the actual card. Like an example might be Brand the Beast. A current example. There's many other things, like in the Altergeist format, there was spoofing, protocol, stuff like that. Like you have a bunch of continuous chap cards that you can just flip up and you don't have to use the effect right away. Like Soul Lake is a good example as well. But basically what happens is that when you flip a card face up, the continuous chap card, and let's say Brand the Beast, for example, you can use its effect on the activation. That's perfectly legal to do. You can also choose to not use the effect, and you can use that effect later in the turn, but it cannot be in the same chain. And that's when the confusion sometimes comes from, because if you were to activate the card, not use its effect on the activation and attempt to use the effect in a higher chain link, that's legal because the card hasn't resolved yet. And with it, the effect that you chose to not activate hasn't resolved either. So that's why basically in a rough explanation is why you can choose to use the effect on the activation, but if you choose to not use it, you cannot use it in a higher chain link. You would need to wait for the card to finish resolving, for the chain to finish resolving, for the card to just be face up, to just be on the field, and then you can activate its effect, of course, later in the turn if you want. But that's basically just a general rule when it comes to continuous chap cards, and I wanted to include it. I felt like it was interesting and just an important thing to note. So those will basically be the 5 rulings. And if you enjoyed these videos, please let me know. I really like doing them and I like bringing that kind of information to you guys. So if it's useful, if it's interesting, I am always glad to hear that in the comments down below. So if you liked it, please like it, sub to the channel, check out all the social media, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.